Well, listen, I won't keep you longer than I need to because I'm so appreciative of your time today, to just really continue the celebration of, this phenomenal, and what's been so nice actually in preparation for this, ahead of it being made available to people to watch again on Mubi, is going back in and going back to watch it, and that thing of kind of going back almost reminds you of that first experience you had of watching the show, of where you were, how it made you feel, what it made you think about. And yeah, not many things do that, I think, in terms of, and also have that longevity. So I'm excited to celebrate it. I guess that's a nice place to start, to be honest, is how it feels for you both to have been part of Twin Peaks and to still see how it resonates, still see how new generations of, fans of storytelling are maybe coming to it for the first time or are revisiting it. Laurie, do you want to start?
Sure. I think what I've noticed most is that it's our culture has evolved since Twin Peaks was first aired, and it has become a much different experience, I think, and almost a different story than what people experienced in 1989 or 90.
Mm.
Yeah, it's I just remember people interpreting it in 1990 and uh, kind of not having the tools and understanding
Yeah.
and insight that most people have now in our culture. So that's something I've noticed.
Dean, what about for you?
Yeah, yeah, I think for me, like I was probably in elementary, first year middle school when the original series came out. I mean, I didn't watch it back then when it aired. I missed that whole wave, but just the fact when I started working for David and then being involved in the return and stepping into that echelon over like huge decades of time, it just felt like wow, like this is a Haley's Comet moment of like when is this, and of course now that he's passed, it's like these things happen and they align and then they dissipate, and it's like, wow, I was there. I saw it happen. It was so cool, and I got to learn about Lori through, starting that job at David and looking through the archive and seeing her name on things, and that I became aware of her and pieced together what she was doing, and it was kind of mind-blowing because it's very much behind the curtain work that we do, and not many people knew about it, and this is the first time I'm like talking with Lori on like a Zoom like this, so it's really cool.
Laurie, how did you come to be part of working with David on Twin Peaks? What was that journey to be part of that team?
He had been looking for a music editor, and he had been hiring or interviewing, excuse me, music editors, and he didn't make any connections. And it was a television show, so you know they were bringing in TV music editors from that era, and nobody was really. I mean, I think people were sort of. I don't know what his experience was, but I know he was not satisfied, and he asked John Huck, his sound production sound recordist, to do the music editing. And John is a friend of mine who I had worked with quite a bit and known. And he said, well, I don't edit music, but I know somebody who does. And so he referred me, and they called me, and I met with David, and
Where'd you
we
meet with him at?
at Tadeo, the old building.
Hmm.
And that's where the cutting rooms were. And Dwayne was there, and they were just great. David and I got into kind of a metaphorical discussion about the music and how to work with it. And I understood what he was talking about. So we kind of bonded. Plus, we're both from Montana. So we were talking about Montana. And he, after about 30 minutes, he said, "Well, you better get started." So I,
Wow, just like
yeah,
that.
yeah, I was 4 feet off the ground. I was so excited. It
Where were
was
they?
really exciting.
Where was the show at that point?
They were editing, they had finished the pilot, and I believe maybe they were still working on it, but um, no, they had been shooting the episodes. So I mean, I started pretty much the next month, the following Monday. It was a Friday, I believe, and I had an editing room like just downstairs from Dwayne's editing room, and then they moved me upstairs across the hall from Dwayne, and um,
Wow.
it, yeah, it was,
89, right?
yeah, in
Wow.
'89.
89 was a huge year for David. Like I and talking to Scott Ryan and looking back at the timetable, and I tried to write out like what was going on around this time and looking at all the tape labels of like Julie's album and everything. You see that he's recording Floating into the Night in January of 1989. He's then shooting the Twin Peaks pilot in February. He's then um, shooting Wild at Heart in August. He's doing the Industrial Symphony in
Mm-hmm.
like October or something
Wow.
like that. So it's like and then he's mixing Wild at Heart at the end of 89. So it's like that year is just so crazy with the creative sort of output that's going on and how he's like multitasking. It's wild.
Yeah, it was a pretty tight ship because he was never missing. I mean, he was always, I mean, I think he just kept everything really centralized.
Yeah.
And I know that he went to New York a lot, but he was always in the editing room. And yeah,
Yeah, Dwayne was handling both of those projects, you know.
yeah,
I guess it's about building up trust with your collaborators as well, in terms of yes, being on the same page, but also having that trust that you have the ability to throw ideas in or to have your own ideas that you can give him that that he knows is kind of is and he'll listen to.
absolutely. And I think that's why it took him a while to find a music editor as well as other people on the team. He hired some people who were open, people who didn't have like this preconceived notion of how it should be done. TV back then was sort of like the Detroit auto industry. It was built for efficiency and
Mm,
no experimentation. So it was the everybody I worked with in editorial and in audio end of it, the mixers were really great,
mm,
really open. The picture editors were um, really willing to experiment. People were stumbling into these wonderful mistakes and making the most of them. And so, yeah, it was quite different from normal television production and post production.
Dean, what about you? How did you come to start working with David?
It was kind of similar. And hearing Lori's experience, it reminds me a lot of like the fact that David like cast his post personnel similar to how he cast the movie. He just kind of sat across the table from him and got a vibe. And I think the whole time in his mind he's like, is this person gonna be on the level, be on the, am I gonna be able to like shoot the shit with them and be comfortable? And but yeah, for me it was the same way. It was like he had a studio in the Hollywood Hills that he built after filming Lost Highway, and the Lost Highway was shot in this house, and then he gutted it and made a mixed stage recording studio out of it, and it was so immense and sort of like done properly that he needed to have a full-time engineer, and so he had an engineer for a number of years, and then they parted ways, and he asked a friend of his, hey, I need a new engineer, and so the friend, sent up some candidates. I just remember having a cold interview with him. And I mean, I was 25 at the time. I probably looked 13. And in retrospect, just going back and thinking about these like life situations where you just are plopped into a meeting, I'm like, he had no business hiring me for that job. Like I it's not like I remember not being a record like I think the job was pitched to me as a recording studio engineer, and I'm like, that's I'm not really trained in that, that kind of thing. But he showed me the studio and he was just like, you know how to work all this? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then the first week I got the job, I was like, oh God. Like, he's like, let's get to work. And I was like, let me figure out how this room is wired. It was wild. But
That's
but yeah,
great.
and the same thing with Lori about the Montana connection. I always had heard that as his bio, like born Missoula, Montana, Eagle Scout, and that's all I knew about his bio. And he was like, "Well, where'd you grow up?" And I said, "Virginia." And he was like, "Oh, I grew up in Virginia. Like I spent my formative high school years there." And I was like, "Really?" And talking like he had a son who lived 20 minutes from where I grew up, and his wife, Mary Fisk, his ex-wife, still lived there on a farm. Jack Fisk's wife or sister, and so the connection was like, and I realized, oh, when I was like in the '80s, when I was a young kid, David was living 20 minutes from me. I had no idea.
Crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
just odd synchronicities like that.
Oh
He
yeah.
he probably felt it. You know that idea where you're like he's sort of feeling a vibe. It's like I totally believe in that. There's a kind of physical
Yeah,
presence with people in a room, isn't there, that you can kind of really it works or it doesn't, doesn't it? You can kind of there's
yeah,
a reason
totally.
for it for sure.
And I've heard him
Hmm.
say later, like when we were hiring production sound recordists for the return, I remember he took some meetings with people, and I wasn't in the meeting, and I was like, "Well, what'd you feel?" Because he want like the same thing with the John Huck thing, where he's like he wanted John Huck to do it. Um, he would like early on he would make me record production sound, and I'm like, I do not want to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. So when Twin Peaks Return started coming around, he was like, "Well, I guess you're recording production sound," and I'm like, I am not doing that. Like, I do not like that job. It's incredibly hard. There are people who know what to do, that have tools. And so he was recording or interviewing production sound recorders. And I was like, how'd you like so and so? And he's like, yeah, he was good, but it's like I wouldn't want to like have a cup of coffee with him. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was important for him to have a rapport with somebody and be able to talk and, you know,
Well, it's
like
it's
chit chat.
interesting what you're saying there about him kind of encouraging you to do other kind of elements around, I guess,
It wasn't
what you
encouraging. It was more like, and I noticed this watching documentaries about Kubrick. It's that back to that trusted circle you mentioned. He gets this trusted circle, and he just starts relying on people to do more
yeah.
than they were brought on to do, because he doesn't want to widen his circle of craftsmen. He just like sound, okay, you can do that,
Hmm.
and it's sort of similar to how I heard like Leon Vitelli working with Kubrick, is he just kept getting more and more responsibility over the years,
Yeah.
and it
It's
keeps
interesting.
that circle of trust tight.
Totally, because I think, Laurie, when you look back at kind of, the first two seasons to start with of Twin Peaks, saying that you were a music editor really undersells what you did on those shows, in terms of how important you were to how that show made us feel, That's the kind of the beauty of music. It's part of the storytelling. It's a character. And I think within Twin Peaks, it's more than one character. It's kind of that's the brilliant thing about it. Um, what was the starting point for you? Because the music, Angelo, obviously, all this incredible music that he was or had composed by that point, and then talk to me a little bit about the kind of conversations that you were having about sculpting, that music and and what you had to do to it. It wasn't just a case of placing it. I think, it's that idea of your but people will listen to this will go, oh, what's a music editor? Some people will be thinking what that is. And I think just saying that's what you did really undersells how much you did on the show.
Yeah, it was um what the way that we treated the music was completely different from the, traditional method of scoring music for film or television. So they pre-recorded all the music and handed it to me, and I organized it. It was the first season I was working on 35 millimeter mag, which is cumbersome, very cumbersome. And so I had a great assistant who was super organized, and I would, part of what I did was I would take like a phrase of the music and loop it and physically make a loop, and then she would take it over to the dubbing facility across the street and get me like 1,000 feet of that so that I would have that to use. And that's how a lot of those, like, we called them mystery loops back then. There are lots of names for them now.
Like for
um,
instance, the quintessential like music that like when it's always like the shot of the overhead fan and it's like that plotting like rom 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 rom.
yeah,
That's that slowed down New York PSA that he
right, yeah,
used.
the rat PSA.
Yeah,
And
exactly. That,
yeah,
and I just discovered that recently. But like, there's all these crazy nuggets where he would steal something that he used prior, and then, like Lori was saying, make a loop of it, and it became a whole nother piece of music.
yeah, what I would do is take, like, I had this solo tracks from for all of the stuff they recorded in New York. So the jazz saxophone, for example, I eventually slowed that down and layered it over some of the dark mystery loops to create other things. And then I, started doing more backwards tracking and playing with that. Um, and it became much easier the second season because I was working with a digital audio workstation that really sped up the process. So I was able to be a lot more experimental and, try things more quickly, determine if something worked and or if I should put it to the side and use it later. But it was it was like a completely different experience the second season. Um,
How long did it
so,
take you to kind of, I mean, I've heard you elegantly describe you learned the sort of his musical language or like the language of the show. How long did, like looking back, do you think you kind of dialed in, or like what was the point you started to get comfortable where you could, just grab whatever?
well, we worked, the first few episodes, he worked closely with me, and um, we would talk about different ideas. And I mean, I always felt really comfortable to try things and show them to him. And he would, if there was something not working, he would be really clear at communicating um, how to adjust it or
Mm,
how it was different from what he wanted. And eventually, I mean, we kind of were developing the language together because I like I would make a discovery and go, oh, this is cool. And so I'd play it for him. And, he would then have it in his encyclopedia for later use as well. And so that's how we built kind of the library of kind of the alternative music of Twin Peaks, the stuff that was manufactured using the pre-existing music. And that over the course, I mean, we kept developing the language up through Fire Walk with Me, and to a point where we didn't really use words anymore. It was when we were doing the final mix of Fire Walk with Me, it was just, eye contact
mm.
and, a funny look or something. And we just understood each other. um, it was,
Wow.
it was a great experience creatively. And I think it affected the way I look at everything.
What
Just
was what? Yeah. What did Angelo write too? Was it script? Was he?
oh no, he would, I mean, sometimes he would see the episode, but when he worked with David, David would more describe a mood and the location,
Yeah.
and he worked with the musicians that way rather than like there was never any playback going on. They weren't scoring to picture; they were creating, you know,
Atmosphere and mood and yeah.
atmosphere, mood, and themes. That
Yeah.
the themes were developed early on and used for the first two seasons, and they would develop new themes as well as needed. And but oh
It's
yeah, he was really good at getting performances and improvisation from the musicians.
Mm. How
yeah,
would you
and going
go on? Sorry, Dean.
going back through like sort of archival material, I kind of found like a original cassette that had all the main themes of like the, I guess, the moods, if you will, of like the placeholders of like um the fat, they called it fast cool jazz, slow
Hmm.
cool jazz, the Laura Palmer's theme, and they were all done on piano Rhodes.
Yeah, they kind of sketched out
Yeah.
the music on the Rhodes piano that Angelo's. What is he got? Oh, we thought
He's
he was going to play it.
But it was all piano Rhodes, so that was all like demos, and it's like they had that of like, okay, here are the set pieces, the tableaus of the musical characters, and then they went to like Art Palimpsest's studio in near Times Square and recorded all that stuff, and then it was like delivered to Laurie or the production as every iteration, like they'd make songs essentially, and then every song had, the drum stem, just brush drums, just saxophone, just, and then alternate mixes of like this plus this plus this, and it was such a huge configuration. It was almost like just a color palette of, okay, we want this, but like not the full cue, like something a little more simplified that just touches the theme, or just squirts a little bit of the callback. And Lori was in that seat of sort of picking and choosing of like, yeah, got it, we could do this here, but this, you know what I'm imagining that was going on in your mind, and how you were collaging all this stuff essentially.
yeah, really sculpting
Right.
it.
Yeah, it was really helpful to have the stems and each instrument separated because um, we'd be using a theme, but there would be something conflicting or too busy or conflicting with something in the sound, the sound effects. So it was just great. Like I'll strip that out, or I'll just a lot of times I would just find one or two instruments to lay in with, in the into whatever piece I was putting together, and like a collage. And it really gave us a lot of power to carve out whatever sort of aspect of the scene was most important, so that you didn't have this big heavy music cue
Mm.
squashing everything. It was, yeah, it was great.
That's
But
the brilliant thing about it. Sorry, go on, Dean.
to give an example of that, Lori, like on the soundtrack, for instance, like that original season one soundtrack, that track, "The Bookhouse Boys," is where it kind of is like a montage of several things. Is that kind of like your editorial creation in that sense of like you combine that? Do you think? How did that come about?
um I
Shall I get
haven't
it?
listened to that. Sure, if you
Yeah,
have it.
go
I'm
ahead.
not sure what they used to put the soundtrack together. It was done that summer during hiatus. I was I was in Indonesia. So I got back
Well-deserved
and they had,
holiday.
yeah, they they had this beautiful thing finished, the CD, and I wasn't a part of putting that together, but and I don't know that they accessed the stems from the actual episodes to get anything that I had done. I kind of don't think so.
Hmm.
It's a good example though of the type of thing that was the sort of result of Laurie's work, because you hear several different songs and they sort of cascade and bleed into each other, and that is like sort of a, what I am envisioning happened a lot on the series of these, the musical collage. And I think there's something really really cool and magical that happens in that kind of scoring approach, as opposed to, someone sitting down and doing something straight to picture. There's almost a something like more complex than any one person, making a significant change, because you're dealing with, I just love collage, and I think that not a lot of things are made in this way.
Yeah, and the power of that is the ability to subtract.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is, I think, what really gave us so much. Um, it was a great tool because everything was happening together when we would bring the sound effects, the dialogue, the Foley, the music together. We were able to say, we don't really need that, pull it out. And it would, that, in that sense, the collage, we were able to make negative space for something else to sort of peek through.
I also love the idea of the perspective of some of the music, and the development of themes and where they are and how important they are in the storytelling in terms of where that character is or where that relationship is or whose perspective are we seeing this from, and I think that, that theme tune is so iconic. And I was reading something, Laurie, where you were talking about it and the idea that, Laura's theme is really about everybody else's, how everybody else in the town felt about her. Whereas you look at the theme from Far Walk with Me and that's Laura, in terms of from her perspective. And I love that idea that as the, as the show and the story progresses, we get these kind of different perspectives through the music, which is so clever.
Yeah, I think yeah, it was great that they developed that theme for Fire Walk with Me. Scott Ryan, who wrote a book about it, the music of Twin Peaks, pointed out that, that was really what about what Laura was going through.
Mm,
It had a saxophone in it, but it was not playful or anything like that. I mean,
yeah.
it it was great in that it brought out her suffering. So that was really powerful in Fire Walk with Me because that's what the movie was about. I mean, that was sort of the primary
Yeah.
focus of the film. But yeah, it was really fun to develop things with, like, the first time Audrey meets Cooper, and there's that fun jazz piece there, and
Yeah.
the vibes work best for in this sort of scenario, whereas saxophone in this, or um there were cues with alto flute that were gorgeous. That was fun. And that by itself, when slowed down, became a completely different animal. The alto flute playing any of the themes.
Yeah. It's almost been recomposed in a way, isn't it? And that idea that this music's been written, you've got all this kind of all these ingredients and you're kind of making a new dish from them in a way in terms of what suits whilst you're editing the episodes or together. It's so incredible to hear the manipulation that was there and the combinations and the reconfiguring it's extraordinary.
And
I
I
think
think
one of the
oh, go ahead.
sorry, I
Well,
was going to say,
I just want to
We're on a delay.
I it was kind of cool that the music started becoming more complex over the, as the episodes went by and be developed into deeper and darker themes, which is how the storyline was as well. And it starts out as a murder mystery, and then it starts becoming way more than that. And the music started becoming more than that, more
Mm.
complex. And there was a lot of, there were so many opportunities to just sort of foreshadow and find, you know, context that wasn't really coming out and sort of underlying, bringing it out a little bit by accenting it.
Go on, Dean. What were
I
you going
think
to say?
one of the I don't know one of the really key core components, I think, to how David and Angelo did music post Blue Velvet, because Blue Velvet was done in kind of the traditional scoring
Mhm.
way,
Mm.
um, is this fact that, but this kept on going throughout the rest of their partnership in films down the line, is the fact that they would go in and dabble and find the sounds in the key songs of the thing, and then that David would be going into production with all that floating in his mind. So he knows the sonic palette, and he's looking at the camera and the scenes and and everything, and with all that music running through his mind. So there's that kind of game of memory playing, but it doesn't happen that way. And I mean, things like even Mulholland Drive, like Angelo writing the main theme for that film before they had even shot any principal production. It's sort
Wow.
of it's that's how it starts with the music. It doesn't start with the images, which I think is a big distinction from how things are mostly done these days.
That's amazing. What Dean, in terms of, when you were put in that big room and told to and told to work out how it worked, uh talk to me a little bit about how that journey kind of started for you, not in terms of, starting to put your stamp on things and starting to collaborate with him, and how that was, I guess, what your perception of what that was going to be and the reality of it, really.
Well, yeah, like I said, when I started it, the job, the kind of listing was like studio engineer. So I went up there kind of a little sheepish, because I thought it was all going to be me, like with an EMI lab coat on, press and record. And then, but like in that first meeting, and the way he talked about the job, where he's like, we do a lot of we do a lot of experimenting up here, and that's the room we do it in. It was like so open ended, of like, oh, this isn't just X job. This is like a whole thing. So starting out up there, yeah, my first job was, he was getting really into, I mean, he's always been into music, but he was recording a lot of stuff on his own. And so my first job up there was recording, like working out and recording the song Ghost of Love for Inland Empire. So it was just kind of like I'm thrust in the seat, and I'm not really a music guy going into that job, but he definitely exploded the world of music in me. But I remember that first week, when I found out I got the job, and I knew it was going to involve music recording. I went to a musician friend of mine, and I was like, "Tell me all you know about bars and beats." Like, I didn't even know what the grid and Pro Tools did, because I was coming from sound effects world, and and I was like, "Tell me about time signatures. Tell me about bars and beats." And just in order to be able to do that. So yeah, like going in there and recording Ghosts of Love the first week, and watching all that just sort of happen, and playing on it as well. Um, that started the whole thing, and it just started expanding from there. It was like more and more jobs, and more and more jobs, and And then, it's not like, I guess by the time of Twin Peaks, the whole thing of like, it was always the thing that came out of his mouth of do we have a, do we have a large scary orchestra choir? And that to me is like, no, we don't have that, but like I got to find it some way. So at that point where the digital realm and things, are so easy, I would just manufacture these things and make them. And when I didn't
Mm,
have a scary choir, I would find tonalities and things and samplers to kind of get like things and to basically manufacture pieces like, like Laurie was doing with slowing down things to
mm,
put in his bin to use. So that's how I kind of evolved to just like making stuff for him, because it was all moving so fast, and it was always a desire. I need this, I need that. Just he would just kind of like spout off like kind of like Tourette's. He would just kind of look at me and he would go, Alphorn. And like, I was like, okay, Alphorn. And I would like look up online, like, what the fuck is an Alphorn? And you'd see this like because I knew in my head it's like Ricola, like that's all I knew. And so I'd look up Alphorn and then I would like maybe I'd find a sample, I'd throw it in a sampler and I'd map it out on a keyboard and I'd be like Alphorn. And then he would like put his hands on, he's like, yeah, and then that's how a piece would come out.
Laurie, you're laughing there. Similar vibe.
Yeah, that is so funny. I unfortunately we didn't really have internet when I was
Yeah, I know.
getting weird requests, but yeah, I mean, I don't, yeah, I think he sort of was led down a path that eventually made him believe that if he said Alphorn, he could have Alphorn like that. But yeah, when I was working with him, he knew that things took time. Um,
Yeah.
he they had an espresso machine on the dubbing stage, and I had lived in Seattle, so I knew how to make an espresso and became like I mean, we everybody did everything for each other. David would answer the phones, other, people, it was kind of all these shared tasks. But anyway, he we needed a big change, a big music change on one of the episodes, and I went up to my editing room, was working on it, and he came in and he said, Lori, I'd really like an espresso right now. I said, okay, well, I want you to decide which is more important, getting all those people back to work that are waiting for me to fix this music, or should I stop and go make the espresso? He said, okay, let's fix the music first.
I love that
But
story. She
yeah,
told me that story, and it encapsulates everything for me. Like that
Oh,
represents my job as well.
yeah, because for him, it's like I need this just as much as I need this. And so, the solution was that I trained somebody else to make espresso the way that I did, and he was very good at it.
how did he feel about Twin Peaks?
How did he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
It was really funny because I remember when we finished the last episode of season one, and nothing had aired, of course.
Mm.
Nobody had any idea how anyone was going to react. And we were all just like, kind of moving forward each day, making this thing, and nobody had seen it or heard it. And so we finished, and everybody's like looking at each other, like, now what? And then he said something like, I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I like it. I think it's good. And of course, then, the whole thing blew
The whole
up.
world. Yeah.
I always noticed um in finishing a number of things with him, like the bigger things like Twin Peaks and things, there was a kind of a solemnness toward the very end where I
Mhm.
thought and expected we would finish the last fix and then everybody would be turning to each other and high-fiving and popping champagne, but it was like a solemn thing where he it would you get to the last fix and it's like, okay, you kind of look back like that was the last one on the list, and he would kind of go, there's one time he was like this. He was like, "Okay, I guess we send it out now," and he just walked out of the room. Like there was almost like a thing of
Oh,
like
wow.
he didn't want to stop working on it, and it was a little bit sad that it
Like,
was done. You know what I mean?
absolutely. I think the journey was the destination.
For sure. I
Yeah.
think that's the secret, the core to understanding him is that
Hmm.
I think a lot of people who ingest this stuff and enjoy it see the result, but for
Mm.
him it was about the experience, like moving through it, and the excitement and the fascination with what happens when you do this, being in the lab, kind of, so to speak. And I mean, he was obviously after a result, but for him, it was definitely more enjoyable to be actively working, on it, I think.
I experienced that as well. I witnessed that it was play for him. So
Mm.
when it was finished, it was almost like you're at your friend's house and a bunch of friends are over, and your mom just pulled into the driveway to pick you up, and
And the party's
it's
over.
party is over. I mean, we had so much fun that had nothing to do with the work we were doing. We were just, we would goof around and do silly things, and it was always fun. Every day was fun. And yeah, it was hard work and long hours, but it was, there was always something either hilarious going on or just some fun play going on.
Yeah.
Like back when they had styrofoam cups for coffee, and we were sitting behind the mixers, and he pushed his coffee cup over a little bit, and this little bubble came up to the surface and sort of rolled around on the top of the cup. And he said, "Did you see that?" And then he did it again. And so he just kept pushing the cup back and forth, making this little bubble roll around. And he was, that was part of like his joy, is
Yeah.
discovering just silly things like that. And one
See,
time when we are mixing I guess it's the main title, or the shot of the waterfall, and he kept making them go backwards, and he goes, "I could just watch that water go up that waterfall all day." It was so sweet.
See,
So
now
yeah.
I feel like the mum who's come to pick the kids up from the
Oh,
party because I can't
thanks.
believe the time already that we've it's been
Um,
so just joyful to spend time with you both and just I can't thank you enough for your beautiful and very personal insights into your time with David, but on working with him and collaborating with him uh and yeah, I'm so grateful for your time today. And I just think it's wonderful that it's getting, a new release and people can access it, and kind of go back to the start and kind of see it through again. And that's just it's the gift that keeps on giving in a way, and wonderful that new generations are discovering it and rediscovering it. So I can't thank you enough for today. Thanks so much, Laurie. Thanks, Dean.
you're welcome. Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank
Edith,
you.
and thanks for what you're doing.
Oh, my pleasure. It's just lovely to kind of highlight the teamwork, all these people, like you say, behind the curtain who are so important in the storytelling and are so important to how we feel when we sit in those theaters or sit in front of our TVs and watch these amazing projects. So thank you for all your hard work, but thank you for your time today.